I'm Ben Ryman, and this is Behavior Speak. In this conversation, Quintara Tucker discusses the importance of cultural humility in applied behavior analysis, her experiences with mentorship and representation in higher education, and her commitment to empowering future generations of Black women in the field. Quintara also delves into her passion for content creation as the Mystical Analyst and the importance of cultural humility in her work. Quintara also expresses her aspirations for future contributions in the field, including publications and community building. Welcome, Quintara.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, stoked to have you. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge I am producing this podcast in the lands of the Comox, Kalehus, Homoko, and Tla'amin First Nations. And as always, I'm grateful to be here. So, Quintara, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Quintara. I never know how to answer this question. I feel like there's a lot of me that comes out at different times. So forgive me if my intro isn't the best, but I'm sure we'll get to all of that at some point.
Yeah, totally.
I'm a BCBA. I currently practice and reside in New Jersey. I'm licensed in a few other neighboring states just to provide services there. I'm school-based. So my full-time job, I do school-based ABA services. I'm a PhD student. I'm an assistant instructor at my same university, which I'm obtaining my PhD from. What else do I do? Content creation. Yes, I'm very, very active on social media. And though I view that as a hobby, I definitely take pride in the work that I put into that.
So how did you find behavior analysis in the first place?
I feel like everyone else, I feel like I fell into it, right? Fun fact, I was a forensic science major. Yeah, so I was going to be a CSI and I couldn't wait. But before I began, so I guess my sophomore year, my second year of undergrad, I started working in a local public school as a substitute teacher. They, loved my work. So then I became a one-to-one paraprofessional. I did wonderful, right? So they're like, whoa, like you're pretty good at this. And I'm like, good at what? Right? Liking kids, right? I thought I was just liking kids at the time.
Yeah.
Turns out I was doing ABA. So a BCBA at that school kind of took me under her wing and was like, look, you're really good at this. You should look more into it. At the time, by then, forensic science was gone, right? So by then I had an undergrad degree in psychology. So I was working on a master's in child psychology and I was just about to finish up. So, the BCBA, I guess we could call her my mentor. She was like, look, you're about to have your master's. It's acceptable for the board. You'll just have to go back and you take some ABA classes. So I did that through FIT. What an amazing experience. And then I became a BCBA. I mean, with COVID and fieldwork hours and supervision in between, I soon became a BCBA in 2021.
What was that like doing all that through COVID?
That was challenging. Because, thinking about it, I actually could get emotional because at that point I had a goal and I'm very, very tunnel visioned. If I want something, I go for it and I don't stop till it gets done. However, this was something that I could not control at all. Right. Typically when folks take a break from school, it's, due to personal reasons, right? Like finances or, taking care of themselves or something like that. This had nothing to do with me. I wanted to keep going, but I could not. So that was very difficult. I actually, lucky enough, the day the world shut down, March 13th, Friday the 13th, 2020, I actually took my last final for my FIT coursework. So my coursework was finished. So luckily, I didn't have to worry about any of that. However, with public schools being shut down, which was my primary environment for obtaining those fieldwork hours, I wasn't getting any hours for maybe, 9 months, perhaps?
Sure.
September, we were able to go back into the school building, just our population. Due to IEP needs and laws in New Jersey, we were able to get back into the school building. However, no BCBA was willing to come back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we didn't have a BCBA consultant at the time.
Got it.
So months a couple months later, we ended up, getting back into the swing of things. Our BCBA consultant was able to come back in. I actually was paying for supervision privately during this time. And like I said, COVID was a time. So they weren't willing to provide with ongoing supervision just because there was no guarantee that I was going to be able to pay, which was accurate. Very, very true, right? So I was very devastated because, like I said, for a couple months, right, I just wasn't accruing any hours, which was holding up my testing date at the time. So lucky enough, our BCBA consultant at the public school that I was working in was like, you know what? I'll just do your hours for free. You are so close. I really want you to pass this school year. That way you could begin the next school year like a full-time BCBA position. So thankfully for her, I was able to finish my hours up. And like I said, I only had a few months left, but I was able to get those done. So that was definitely difficult because I feel like I didn't have access to a lot of things at the time.
Wow. And it was a crazy world at that time too.
It was like no one knew what was going on, right? So yes, I was at work. Yes, I had some sort of normalcy. Yes, it was great. My students were flourishing in a setting and environment, right? Low class size numbers, half day schedule, right? I think it was great for our kiddos, but like you said, when no one knew what was happening in, literally around the world at that time. So
Yeah. And so did you stay, and have you continued to stay working in the schools?
I have continued to stay working in the schools, not that specific school, but in a neighboring, right? I work about 2 miles from that school. So unfortunately, I just didn't find it to be appropriate to take a BCBA position in that school, considering I was a substitute teacher there. I was a paraprofessional there. I've built friendships. I've built relationships. So to go in there and say, hey, now like you guys got to kind of listen to me, it was kind of awkward. So I ended up working immediately after passing my exam for an organization, a company, an ABA company that my mentor that I spoke about in the beginning, who said, hey, you're good at this, that she worked for. So now she and I are colleagues. So that was pretty cool to end up full circle like that.
Yeah, yeah. So what kind of work are you doing in the schools right now?
So right now it's more like consulting, right? But lucky enough, they have me there all day, every day. So it's wonderful. I'm able to do my consulting, but I'm also able to still do direct work, which is my absolute favorite.
Yeah. And are these young kids? What's the population?
Yeah, so pre-K all the way through sixth grade is the primary population of the district that I'm working in, but I primarily work with grades 3 to 6.
Yeah. And whereabouts are you? Where are you in the States?
So New Jersey,
Okay.
so kind of South Jersey, Central Jersey-ish. I'm not sure if you're familiar, Ben, but there's
Yeah.
this argument that Central Jersey, right, does
Yeah.
not exist,
Okay.
right? So I'm about 10 minutes from our capital, Trenton.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. Something to learn about another time then. Right
Yeah.
on. Yeah. I understand though New Jersey seems to have like maybe the most BCBAs sort of anywhere. Is that fair to say?
Yes, we are considered, I guess, what is called a progressive ABA state. I like to call us the autism hub, to be honest, just because with JFK in New York right there, a lot of folks fly in to receive services, especially up north of Jersey.
Mm. Right now we're talking. It's March 2025. A lot of crazy things going on in the world again. Are you sort of concerned about your job and sort of all that sort of stuff with some of the sort of threats that have been that sort of came out sort of in the election and since then?
So, am I concerned about my job? No, because I feel like our services are always going to be very much needed. Currently, I believe with the current statistics that we have, there are about 2 jobs for every certified BCBA right now. That is not concerning. However, am I concerned for my possible position? Yes, because I am school based, right? So again, with all of the crazy, political things and political talk, I guess we can say, that is occurring, I would be lying to you if I didn't sit down and think like, okay, what if I don't have a job soon, right? So that has been a recent thought of mine, yes.
Gotcha. So from a job security standpoint, you could
hmm
work sort of just in the home based or center based kind of stuff, but in the schools, there it's a bit scary.
I think so, right? But that's the luxury of being a BCBA because there are so many different sub-disciplines that we can enter. right? So even if I'm not working in a school, there's so many different other things that we can do. However, it just concerns me, right? Not only for my job security, but for my students, right? For my
Yeah,
learners.
yeah, yeah. And then tell me a little bit more about content creator. How'd you get into that, and what's your focus in there?
So to be honest, Ben, I needed an outlet. I needed a hobby. I feel like I was honestly spending way too much time working, right?
Mm. Yeah,
And what better way to blend the two things that I love, right? Working plus Instagram. I feel like
yeah,
those are my two favorite things right now.
yeah, yeah,
So I said, you know what? Like, I really should create an ABA Instagram page. I think you might be familiar with the Instagram page my sister and I created back in 2020, ABA Sishias.
yeah.
That derived from COVID, us being home. We're both in ABA,
Mm.
right? So we were providing more like study tips and, tricks on that page way back when. So then I decided to kind of branch out on my own, not because, I didn't love what we were doing with that, but my sister was taking a break. She's currently, she had to finish her hours at the time. She's currently studying for the exam. So that's clearly not her priority. So I took it upon myself to kind of start something on my own and kind of let my own personality shine through
Mm.
something.
Mm. Mm.
So that's when the Mystical Analyst was born.
Yeah, yeah, and truly mystical. It was
Hmm.
only, and I was saying to you before we hit record, I don't scroll as much as I used to. I actually took the apps off my phone a while back, distanced myself somewhat. Not so much for my mental health, literally actually for my neck. I was getting text neck, and I was getting sore, and I was having some
Yeah,
posture issues, and I started some exercise programs, and
yeah,
and I was like, the only way I'm going to keep my head up is if I stop looking at my phone. So I glance at this
yeah,
stuff on the desktop, but just not as often, right? Anyway, so I was checking out your account just to kind of prep a bit for this, and I always see the Mystical Analyst, and always kind of wondered what that meant. And then I just kind of read your bio for the first time, and reads it, just a black female BCBA CEO, PhD student who drives a Camaro. There's a Camaro story there too, which we'll have to get to. Collects crystals, sees angels, numbers, charts on the moon, and burns stage. So clearly mystical. I was wondering,
yeah,
before we get back into some of your doctoral work and some of the other things that have been
yeah.
going on, if you could tell me a little bit about this side of you. The first secret word is, of course, mystical. Do you have a credential with the International Behavior Analysis Organization, the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or would like a certificate of attendance for another organization? You can earn continuing education units by going to www.behaviorspeak.com, clicking on CEUs, and entering the 3 secret words.
Sure. So that is definitely a hobby that also derived out of COVID, right? And I don't want to get too personal or too deep into it, but COVID was a time and some things that were working before were just not working anymore, right?
Yeah,
In terms of my social anxiety, right? That's when my anxiety became at an all-time high. So I needed to put my energy into something else as opposed to the news,
yeah,
right? I've always been I guess we could say, powerful, magical person. I've always communicated with those who have passed on in my dreams. So that's always been something of mine that, I would grow up and tell my mom about. And she definitely believed me, but kind of, you know, validated it, but then kind of redirected it,
yeah, yeah,
as
yeah,
well. But as I, became older, some things such as like the feelings or the readings of energy, right? Like if I were to step into a room, something would tell me immediately to leave, right? A lot of those things I feel like I just couldn't ignore anymore, especially during COVID time. But interestingly enough, right before COVID, my grandfather passed away. So he passed away in 2019. That was one of, those losses. That's that one loss that I've encountered in my life that was like, wow, like, this is real, right? This
yeah,
this wasn't my goldfish. This wasn't like, my first pet. This was, my best friend essentially. So before he passed, like, I lived with him. So the night he passed, actually, I was walking down the hallway past his room and it's like I entered a black hole. It was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced.
yeah,
Later, that next morning, we come to find out that, he passed. So since then, I've been getting what I would like to call communications from him or my angels.
Sure.
So I started to see angel numbers, which are repeating
Hmm.
number sequences
Okay.
right after he passed. And I was like, you know what? Like, this cannot be a coincidence, right? Sometimes, like, you see them, like, oh, that's cute, right? But when I was seeing them on everything, all of the time,
Yeah.
right? And they would be very specific numbers. So I would see the date that he passed, I
Okay.
would see his birth date,
Yeah.
I would see 444, 222. I would see my birth date. Eventually, I started to Google this kind of stuff. I was like, something is going on. Like, I'm not crazy. And that's when I found out that numerology exists.
Hmm.
And it really is just like a science that kind of says, that numbers do have meaning, right? And when they're placed in a specific order, their meaning strengthens, etc.
Cool.
So I've gotten into that, and each sequence of numbers actually means something different. So I've translated it as that's my grandfather or my angels communicating with me as I navigate this crazy earth. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where all of that started. And with the angel numbers comes the collection of crystals, right? Most believe that those crystals do have healing powers, and then comes with the sage, and then the moon phases, because all of that kind of goes together.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. I think my wife has some of those kind of similar kind of connections,
Yeah, yeah.
and she's brought me a bit out of skepticism. We spent a day, I don't know, not a day, but an hour with a medium one time,
Oh, cool.
and connected with some folks,
Yeah.
and it was legit. Kind of gave me a sort of different perspective on sort of this whole world and what's happening next, and how we're, and what's happening right now, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, but there's a lot of kind of cool
Yeah.
stuff going on, and so it's nice knowing he's still there with you, though, eh? That's probably a
Yeah.
big part of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Indeed. Indeed. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
comfort, right?
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Right on.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit. There's a story you told me. It escaped me a little bit, but there's a Camaro story you tell and a Camaro reference, and I wouldn't mind hearing that one again.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, to be honest, it's literally just my dream car. It's just my dream car. It's a car that I've wanted since I was 10 years old, and I was able to get it. It'll
Yeah.
be 3 years ago now.
Wow.
Actually, in a couple days, I would have gotten it 3 years ago.
Hmm.
So not only is the Camaro my dream car, but it's definitely a true, I guess, testament of my hard work,
Hmm.
me being able to chase my dreams over the years.
Yeah.
And it's a true testament of me saying when I want something, I don't stop until I get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I take pride in that car. But I was able to speak at ABAI
Yeah.
last year,
Right.
and my talk was actually it revolved around my car. So that was
Okay.
pretty cool.
Yeah. So without sharing the whole talk, what was kind of the
Yeah.
gist of it? Yeah.
So the gist of the talk or overall was cultural humility. That is definitely one of my favorite topics right now in ABA. So what I did was I introduced the talk, or I started off the talk by showing my car, explaining how wonderful the car is. I shared that it was featured in the Philadelphia Auto Show last year, which was also in the same location that ABI was going to be hosted.
Wild. Yeah.
So those synchronicities, right?
Yeah.
That's what
Nice.
you can't escape. Some things you just can't escape. So I was able to tell the audience, like, literally 6 months ago in this room, my car was over in the next area, on display, like, for folks to come and folks to come and check out, and even to unfortunately judge, right? Because with good things also comes criticism. So I was able to say, like, you know what? Like, even though I think my car is beautiful, like, you look at it, it's clean, it's fast, it has all the features that, any car person would love and enjoy. It still gets stereotyped by the police. It's still, it still gets talked about like, oh, well, why didn't you get a different model or a faster model, right? So I compared my car to myself, and I was able to
Yeah.
say, like, you know what? I am my car. I'm standing before you here at ABAI, the largest ABA conference right now. And as a Black woman, I'm speaking to you at this primarily white conference. right? And you're probably here because what? You support me, you wanted to hear this talk, but some of you are probably here to criticize, right? Or to stereotype or to judge, right? Just like you would my car.
Yeah.
So yeah, without giving away the whole talk, that was the point. Of course, there was some science and mixed all in between and some
Sure,
examples,
sure.
but it was very touching and moving, and a few audience members actually were ended up crying. So it was
Yeah.
one of my favorite talk experiences to date.
Had you been to ABAI before?
No, that was my first time.
And so what was that like, and how do you think, what was that experience like?
So truthfully, the experience was absolutely wonderful. And I first want to say that I would not have been there if it weren't for my mentor, Tom Zabo, who realized, hey, I have this pedestal and I see your potential. I have this pedestal. Let's do this, right? I know a lot of people say, hey, just like come to this conference with me or come to this event with me. He really said, hey, I want you to come to this conference with me and I want you to present. You have some great work here and other people need to see it, right? So if it weren't for his cultural humility, I would not have been able to present there. So I'm very grateful for that. But my overall experience with the conference,
Hmm.
I feel like it's 50-50. I feel like it's very difficult to say, hey, I really loved it, or hey, I'm never going to do that again. And let me start by saying that it was in Philadelphia the last time that I went. So that's very close to me. Again,
Yeah.
geographically, it's about 20 minutes from me. So I'm there all the time. I felt comfortable. I felt at home. Right. However, the conference environment itself was different than any other conference that I've attended. To be blunt and to be, I guess point blank, it was primarily white. It was, right? So that definitely was a culture shock that I had to adjust to, right? There are some primarily, Black conferences that I'll attend, and, maybe I don't have to code switch. Maybe
Hmm.
I could be more relaxed in certain settings. Maybe I don't have
Yeah.
to think twice about my outfit. But in this particular environment, there were things such as professionalism and my hairstyle, even that I really was second guessing and, really, really thinking about. So like I said, it wasn't the worst experience, but it also wasn't the best, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It probably wasn't all that cheap.
Oh my goodness, no. And again, I live 20 minutes away and I spent thousands to stay the night. That way I was already on site to be there. The tickets, the membership, yeah, it came out to be thousands. I don't know the exact number, but I'll say it definitely was almost 2,000
Yeah.
for everything.
And you're down the road, which
And
is
I'm down the road,
just wild.
down
Okay.
the road.
Yeah, crazy. What did you present on? Like, what was the main topic? It wasn't your Camaro, so
No,
that's probably not what got you into the conference.
no. So it again, generally it was about cultural humility, but more
Mm,
specifically, it was about Hayes's addressing framework,
mm,
which are essentially 10 cultural variables that we should consider when we're providing, services, in ABA.
mm,
Unfortunately, that framework was developed for psychologists and the social work field. So my goal for the talk was to make it a little more behavior analytic by throwing in our, 4-term contingency into that. And, funny enough, based on my topic presentation, right? Yeah, the microaggressions that I've experienced while there, it was just insane. And it was a reminder that this is why I need to present on this topic.
yeah. And is this what your dissertation work is on,
I'm
or what are you
hoping
doing there?
so. So my dissertation work is overall going to be, again, generally cultural humility. As I move along in my program and as I'm networking with different professionals in the field and again, wonderful scholars, I'm starting to gain interest in different sub areas. So I'm hoping to do some work on cultural humility, but more specifically, perhaps self-reflection, right? Because we cannot engage in cultural humility without certain self-reflective, behaviors or processes to definitely say that we've mastered that, or hey, like considering ourselves to be culturally humble, essentially, because it's a lifelong process. It's like it's work. right? So in order to really do the work, we have to really sit with ourselves and self-reflect and self-monitor our behavior and actions.
Yeah, I had Dr. Tarbucks and Dr. Nasia on talking all about this topic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and and of course
Yes.
he's super passionate about self-reflection and
Yep.
taught me a lot about self-reflection,
Yes.
not just in the interview, but in some other experiences as well.
Yeah.
What makes you want to focus on this area?
Again, just the microaggressions and what I've faced in this field as a Black woman, or just it faced in Earth, right? As a Black woman. So again, like to be at ABAI, what we would call a very professional, exquisite, extravagant, conference, but the most scientific conference that we have, right? And still, be microaggressed on it was kind of contradicting. If this is the smartest bunch of people that we have in our field right now, and they're questioning why I'm on the stage, my mind was blown. Mind was
Yeah,
blown.
yeah.
hmm
So why why have you looked at this addressing framework?
Simply because, right, you can't just say you want to engage in cultural humility. You can't just say you want to be better. What specifically are we looking at to better ourselves, right? So again, that framework breaks down 10 different cultural variables such as age, disability, sexual orientation. And it asks us to take a look at those variables and to identify our own biases within those contexts, and that'll better help us when we're working with others who may identify with those cultural variables.
So what's that look like? I mean, 10 constructs is a lot to sort of, wrap your head around every time you're kind of engaging in an
Yeah.
exchange. So what's sort of your thought on kind of how it might be used?
Well, so far in my experience, right, I haven't come across an individual who's identified with all 10, right? So I don't have to sit down with all 10 at the same time. However, in my experience, what typically happens is, especially with the clients and families that I work with within the home setting, each construct is going to come up or pop up at different times, right? So right now it's Ramadan,
Yeah.
right? Now I'm going to take a look at the religion construct of that framework, right? What are my thoughts, or what do I already know about Ramadan? What are my stereotypes, right? Let me write out, or self-reflect on my implicit biases, right, regarding the religion, or the practice, the holiday, right? So like I said, it's not all at one time where you just sit down and you say, okay, this is what I'm taking into account. It's from my experiences, when they pop up, I'm able to sit down and ask myself, what do I already know, what it is that I want to learn, and how do I learn that information, right? What behavior do I engage in to, ensure that I don't, unintentionally offend, the family there.
Yeah. So when I think about humility
hmm
and self-reflection, I think about Dr. Wright's paper, and I think about
Yes.
this all comes back down to bias, and that's sort of the central thing. We all have bias. It's a
hmm
given.
Yep.
Every single person,
Yep.
whether they're the Pope or the Queen
Yeah.
or your grandma, everyone's got
Yeah.
some bias. And
Yep.
the idea here is that we need to recognize that and sort of realize that what we think about things isn't necessarily what everyone else is thinking about things, and try to kind of put that aside when you're kind of going in. And so is this framework meant to be kind of like a prompt for folks? Like, you know,
Yes.
there's a lot of different things you can be biased about. So here's what's that, 10? Here's counting the letters there. Here's sort of 10 different things that you could be thinking about, and sort of maybe, even have a poster up on your wall before you go into a meeting or in your date book, and just go, okay, which of these things are present, and what am I thinking about this situation, and what do I need to toss out the door when I go in, and what kind of questions do I need to ask?
Yeah, so essentially, right? And unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of work done in ABA with this framework. I think there has been a chapter or two in a textbook written about this. Sean Capel, who also is I guess a learner, and a faculty at Capella, where I go, right? I remember when that book and that chapter was released, and that's kind of sort of when I kind of fell in love with it. So again, there's not a lot of work on it, but the way that he and the other authors within that book frame that is more so, like you said, this is a prompt. These are the questions we have to ask ourselves when we experience, some sort of cultural differences. that we may not understand or that we may have bias towards, right? Because like you said, we all have bias. We're human. And I don't want to hear any human say that, they're not biased or they don't see color or like, you know
Mm,
what I mean? Like
mm,
we
mm.
all do, right? This is a part of it, but that's where that cultural humility piece comes in. And that's us being able to identify that bias and work around the clock, for a lifelong process,
Yeah.
working to ensure that we change our behavior and better it from the time before, right?
What's been I mean, you've already talked about Dr. Zabel being a great mentor. Has it been, has it felt pretty safe to kind of have these kinds of conversations at Capella? I don't know anything about the universities in the States, and so I'm curious
Yeah.
what that's been like. And then on a kind of a part B question,
Mhm.
um, does it still feel that way with, a lot of the changes that are kind of coming into play and sort of a lot of the sort of is the sort of government suggesting universities can and cannot do anymore? The second secret word is mentorship.
So yes, I feel like I absolutely love my program, and I feel like I'm not just saying that because I'm paying my way through. However, um, I've met some wonderful mentors along the way who again have really who really sat down with themselves, right? And want to see the learners succeed, especially within the doc program. So I have nothing but
Yeah,
wonderful things to
neat.
say about that. However, I will say that my experience, if it were not for Dr. Nasia, I
Mm,
wouldn't have connected with another Black woman in higher education.
mm, mm.
So I'm lucky enough to have connected with her.
Yeah.
Again, this is before I even knew she worked for the university.
Okay.
So I've connected with her just because, again, Tom ensured that I met her, right? So not only is he getting me in these rooms, but I'm
Oh, neat.
presenting and he's introducing me and he's helping me network. Hey, you should
Yeah.
meet this one. Hey, you should speak to this one. Hey, this one is also interested in cultural humility or self reflection or whatever it is. You should definitely exchange information. So he's facilitating that kind of stuff for me, while at ABAI. And honestly, since I've met him, he was my first professor for my
Mm,
first real course at Capella years
okay.
ago. So, he's been, a heaven sent since. So, but I will again, I think my only complaint is, but it's not even a complaint because it's something that I've experienced my entire life, especially upon entering ABA, is there's not many people in leadership who look like me that can pave the way or that can guide me, as higher education is something that I definitely aim for later in life.
Yeah. Sorry, are you hoping to be that person for somebody one day then?
Well, totally. Right now I do have my own business, so I do a lot
Mm,
of consulting work,
yep.
but I also do a lot of mentorship and fieldwork supervision for folks. So I definitely completely supervise someone for free for up to 2 years, every 2 year cycle.
Oh, amazing.
Any conference that I am at, you can ensure that 1 to 2 people are there sponsored by me.
Hmm.
Just because
Cool.
I feel like there has to be a way in, or
Yeah.
there has to be, hey, I'm going, let me take you with me, or something. I just feel like it has to be seen, right? As a Black woman who now I believe has a, yeah, not at the highest pedestal, but a pretty high, pedestal or platform. I really want to use that. And I want to use that humbly and in the right way. And the best way to do that is to give back. And like you said, be that person that I had not had. But right now, again, as I'm growing my network, I'm finding a lot of folks who are like, Quintara, if you need anything from Black woman to Black woman, you just let me know. So I'm very excited about what's to come.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like there's maybe starting to be more spaces for Black women to connect. Has that been your feeling?
Yeah, yeah, I think so too, right?
Yeah.
Funny enough, I actually just went last month to the Black Women in Behavior Analysis conference.
Right.
So that was pretty fun. This was the first in person
Okay.
conference that they hosted. So amazing. I love being around my people, my peers, my colleagues, but more importantly, my sisters, right? So it was a ball.
How many folks do you think were at that one? Hazard
Over
a
a
guess.
hundred,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
over 100.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It wasn't just for women either. Like there
Right.
were there were a deal of men there as well.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, right on. And did you speak, or were you just attending, or?
Yeah, so I presented lately around, everyone calls it my conference tour,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because I try to disseminate at any conference that
Hmm,
I that will have me, right?
sure.
But more recently, I've put together a panel of Black women. And each conference, I change up the panelists. Aside from there's three of us who are solid because it was our idea. And, we work together and collaborate on building the panel. But it consists of all Black women. And what we try to do is we include one woman who is considered to be seasoned in the field, has those accolades and could, shine light on, that mentorship and things like that. And then we try to include someone who is new to the field and who hasn't spoken at conferences yet, because I
Love
want
that.
to, bridge
Yeah,
that
yeah.
gap
Yeah, yeah.
there. So this year at the Black We Bad conference, it was myself, Dr. Jewel Parham, Olivia Hurd, it was Portia James, and Dr. Ashley Carrigan.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was a good one.
That's a good chunk of folks that have been or will be on this podcast too. So that's fun. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, right on.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I got Ashley coming on soon. And
That's
so yeah,
awesome.
yeah, super awesome. Right on. That's really neat. And so who are the core three then in that group?
Myself,
Yeah.
Jewel, and Olivia. Olivia and I actually met because she's in my program as well.
Okay.
One day she saw me on social media and she commented on one of my posts and was like, "I think you're in my class."
Yeah, yeah,
And we were in the same class. And since then
yeah,
we've been collaborating. So again, this isn't the first time we've done this. We presented this at WEBA
yeah.
last year as
Nice.
well, again with different folks, and we hopefully can plan to present it at conferences that are coming up soon.
And what's she kind of into? I've only heard the name recently. So what's her focus at school? Because I'll probably reach out, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely reach out to her because I
Yep.
think she'll be able to explain it
Yeah, yeah.
a lot better. Her focus is she works with the elderly.
Oh.
She
Enough
works with
said.
the
Enough
elderly.
said. Yeah.
So
Cool.
that's she actually did an individual presentation at the
All
Black
right.
We Bad conference as well. Yeah, that's her.
Yeah.
That's her
That
focus
that
there.
that that sells it alone. So
Yes.
I'll let her know I'll be reaching out. And
Yeah.
I'm actually meeting with Jewel on Mondays for
Awesome.
a conversation as well. So yeah, it's
Awesome.
you got
That makes me so happy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I met with her prior, not to be on the podcast, just to kind of connect about some
Yeah.
things, and
Yeah.
I love talking to her. So I think it'll be
Yeah.
a good discussion, kind of
Awesome.
whatever we get into. Okay, right on. Shifting gears a bit, and kind of going
Yeah.
back a bit to back to Instagram, and so I was kind of scrolling through again, doing a bit of research there, and noticed you recently had a bit of an odd experience, and that's maybe led into some possibility of some more work kind of down the road. So tell me a little bit about what's been happening on Instagram and some of the odd bits there.
Yeah. So aside from the mysticism piece of my Instagram, the primary audience of my Instagram is Black women in ABA. If you really follow me and you really engage with me and my content, majority of those individuals again are just Black clinicians in ABA. So with that sidebar, I've recently been reported to the board. I've recently been contacted by my state board, stating that someone has reported me for misinformation, engagement in cultural humility, and I guess the individual was not happy that I blocked them from further commenting on my page and on my things. But the content that I post is definitely parody. It's a hobby to me. Like
Sure.
I'm not, there are a few paid collabs that I have, but for the most part, Instagram is not paying any of my bills.
Yeah.
So, right, I'm on there to make folks laugh, to create a platform for, other clinicians and to really show folks that like, hey, I'm a real person. Yes, I'm a BCBA. These are my real experiences, from day to day. So I recently posted a 7-second reel, a voiceover reel, right? So I'm not, speaking directly my specific opinion. I'm just, voice overing something, that was recently posted by someone else. And the caption, right, was more so discussing the fact that I am nervous that ABA in general or ABA in schools, right, may be, diminished due to a lot of the political talk that has been going on regarding the DEI and the dismantling of the DOE. So
Fair.
again, it's just me trying to put humor into a very sad situation,
Yeah.
because if we don't laugh, we're going to cry, right? An individual ended up commenting on the post, suggesting that I, produce some links or some proof that this is a thing. If I've explained to them that, this is an opinion piece, check the caption. This isn't, legit, right? I'm just personally nervous about this.
Mm.
Later on, the individual continued to comment, engaged in name calling, things like that. So I just ceased all comments on the post, because I don't plan for my Instagram to be a place where folks are going back and forth, right? We got better things to do. I'm
Yeah.
posting to make y'all laugh, and then I'm even getting off. I do not want anyone on my page arguing or going back and forth. So I disabled all comments on the post, and I also blocked this individual. 2 weeks from that date, I received a notice from the board that I was reported, and I know it's that individual because the report was not anonymous. So I was provided with all of that individual's information. So I
Wow.
knew it was them. But I mean, at this point, I'm waiting for a decision to be made. I had to appeal the claim or kind of respond to it. So I'm just waiting to kind of hear back from that.
There's a bit I feel like I misheard you. So you said
Mhm.
you got reported for cultural humility.
Oh, that's what was written in the claim.
Yeah. And so typically this is something you want to be accused of.
100%. That I
Right?
would love to be,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. Uh, and I presume, I would hope that the state board doesn't have a code that says thou shalt not be culturally humble. And so it seems that maybe possibly this person didn't really understand the definition of cultural humility, or maybe they weren't maybe necessarily being culturally humble themselves.
I think it could be both ways. And
Hmm.
I think my concern with all of this, right? And if a vulnerable moment, when I received that notice, I will say I thought it was scam.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was real. I didn't know, what it was, right? I've never had to report anyone. From my understanding, when we're reporting folks at this top tier violation, I wouldn't even know where to go to report an
Yeah.
individual. So I wasn't sure of what I was even looking at, right? After reading through it and, taking some deep breaths, I was like, you know what? Like, I was really reported. So
Hmm.
I was really sulking in that for a minute. But then I thought to myself, okay, this cannot break you down. Like, you have an audience, you have a
Yeah.
following, you have individuals who are currently learning from you post this
Hmm.
experience.
Hmm.
So I posted the experience, right? The amount of love and the flooding of comments that I've received on a specific post that says, please keep going. Unfortunately, there were a lot of comments that said, join the club, which
Hmm.
means that I'm not the only one that this has
Got it.
happened to.
Yes.
Right. So after receiving all of that support and all of that feedback, I was like, I have to do something about this. Right. Especially after reading the actual complaint or the claim. I thought to myself, the problem here isn't only that I've been reported, right? Because I can't tell for sure, but I am a Black woman. I am an ABA. I am discussing politics against a specific politician that, maybe this individual favors, right? That could be one thing, right? So yes, problem number one is that I've been reported for something as, minuscule as, utilizing my First Amendment right, right?
Uh-huh.
But the second issue is that I've been reported and the report makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like the biggest concern that I have is that we are not understanding and digesting, and I'm saying we, right, as behavior analysts, we are not understanding and digesting the ethics code properly. We don't know how to interpret these codes.
Uh-huh.
We,
Uh-huh.
folks are just throwing them out there. Oh, you're a violation of 1.07 or you're a
Right.
violation of 1.02. But do we understand what that really is, right? And I think there was a huge misunderstanding within the report itself, right? So either, right, it could have been a typo, or it could have been the fact that I really was reported for engaging in cultural humility. And
Mm-hmm.
again, as we discussed, that is something that we want to engage in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the rare sort of positive pat on the back that you kind of want to get. And so, what you mentioned, you've put a proposal in, and this episode's going to come out probably long after a decision's been made from the board, and probably long
Okay.
after the
Mhm.
call for papers ends. So we'll probably know
Yeah.
a lot more about what's going on. So you put a proposal into WEBA related to this. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, WEBA is my favorite conference. And if you are going to go to any conference,
Mm,
at any time,
yeah,
please let it be women in behavior analysis. The culture, the overall, vibe, energy.
yeah,
It's the conference that aligns, I think, the most with my values as an individual and as a BCBA. So I'm just going to plug that out there. But yes, so I felt like not only because is that one of the next conferences that are coming up, right?
hmm,
But again, I think it's the perfect audience to kind of share this information, right? So I submitted a proposal. Um, that for a 50-minute talk, right, about our ethics code, right, and the consequences of of falsely reporting, right. So I plan to utilize my time, or I plan to kind of talk about the ethics code, how we should be, like, the importance of really understanding it, and the importance of really understanding what reporting can do to someone and their reputation and potentially their career, right.
yeah,
When I was reported, the individual cited my business, my website. So it's one thing to kind of strip me from my certification, but to also strip me from my life, essentially, something that I've built from the ground up. I felt like, that's just a tad bit more personal. Um, yeah, I think folks should be aware of the consequences of that. Yeah,
and that there probably should be consequences, sort of, to those who are reporting falsely, or those who are,
I agree.
sending out messages that don't make any sense. And I mean, I even question why this you even were given the opportunity to appeal versus this thing just being like, no, no, sir, this we're tossing this because this doesn't make any sense. Why they decided to sort of even take it far enough for you to know about it?
No, I completely agree. I agree with that. And not only did I have to send in an appeal, but I had to send my resume and my
Wow,
CV,
wow,
which I felt like was that was kind of degrading
yeah,
to me. Like, what if I'll send it? Here's, here you, it's beautiful. I'll send
yeah.
it. But what is that information going to do for, in terms of the complaint or the report? What does my education have to do with anything that's going on here? What does, my recent presentations have anything to do with what's going on here? Right. I don't know. The whole thing is kind of
And
interesting.
it makes you kind of question, since we're talking a lot about cultural humility today,
Yeah.
the people reading these things and what
Hmm.
they're making their decisions on. And if you were somebody else, would you have gotten asked to do all this? Would you have gotten asked to send your resume in? Would you have gotten asked to appeal? And could it be potentially because of some of your identities that you're getting
Yeah.
talked to a little more than maybe someone else might be? I mean, we don't know, because hopefully they keep some of the stuff private, but it's based on sort of who reported and who's being reported. Are you getting more attention to this potentially than someone else might be? And there's a big problem there. So it's not just reporting,
Yeah.
but it's being reported to and dealing with reporting.
No, I agree, and it's fairly this process is fairly new. I got to be the first one in New Jersey
Hmm.
because we just approved licensure months ago.
Oh wow. Okay.
So this licensing board is brand new. So
Wow.
again, at this point, I'm just concerned, or convinced, essentially, that there's not proper protocols in place for the complaints that were filed,
Yeah.
processes involved, right? So right now, I'm convinced that folks are just doing their jobs, right? So, but this brings up conversation, and it brings up the fact that, culture humility is present all around us, and it should be in all rooms.
Yeah. You mentioned you're on the conference tour. Do you have any more coming up? Any more presentations coming up?
So right now, no more conference presentations. Like I said, I've submitted a
All right.
few papers to WEBA because that is the next one I would love to just kind of present at. Either way, I'm still attending that one. I kind of had to do a thing where I chose 3 conferences this year. Last year, I very humbly spoke at 7.
Wow.
But as we talked about the price of ABAI, there's not many organizations that are much different. So I definitely spent a good amount of money last year on conferences. So I'm not doing any conference presentations, but there are a few like speaking engagements and, podcasts and professional development, presentations that I have lined up for the rest of the spring.
Right on. And so what's kind of got the speaking future set in stone. What are some of the other sort of long-term plans for the future, goals for the future for Quintara? Third secret word is ethics.
So you know what? Long-term goals? That's a hard question to answer because I'm just ready to be done with this dissertation. But I definitely in the near future, I see publications in my near future. I see book chapters in my near future. I'm very, very excited. I'm waiting on a release of one that I spent all last winter preparing.
Wow.
I see potentially or hopefully a full-time position in higher ed. I would absolutely love that. So that's really what I'm working towards. Right now, I feel like I am at a spot in my career where everything is okay, right? I'm kind of in my standstill era where it's like I'm living in the moment, I'm absorbing everything, and then when opportunities come my way, we're just going to take them. But I definitely am convinced that after, my PhD has been achieved, there'll be some other things that, come across the way.
Can you tell me a little bit about this book chapter?
Yeah, I mean, I can. It's about, I don't want to speak too much about I will share who I wrote with. I co-authored with Asia Johnson, the one and only Asia Johnson. She is absolutely wonderful. One of my mentors. And we wrote about implicit bias, ableism, and onlyness in ABAI.
Wow. Okay. And so when might we see this in
I don't know.
publication now?
I don't know. It's in its editing
Gotcha.
phase now.
Okay.
We finished our final stuff, and we just, it's not in our hands right now. So
Got it. Well, I think I have like a 3-month turnaround on podcasts, so we'll see where things are at, and maybe you'll have a little more information for the show notes by then.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I would love that.
Yeah, right on. And you keep dropping names for people I gotta look up now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which is super awesome. Really cool, Quintara. I love talking to you today.
I know. It was a pleasure. I love our conversations, even when we just kind of chat and it's not it's not recorded.
Yeah. Well, I think there'll probably be a whole lot more in the future. So thanks for coming on.
I would love. Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It means so much.
Right on. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Quintara Tucker. Check out these other Behavior Speak podcast episodes. Episode 142 with one of Quintara's panelists, Portia James. Episode 136, Anti-Racism and Behavior Analysis with Sonia Levy. Episode 67 on Self-Reflection with Dr. Nasia Surincioni-Ulizi and Jonathan Tarbox. And episode 22 on Cultural Competence with Jessica Bethel. And please follow us on Instagram @BehaviorSpeak.